You're listening to episode 132, Healing Unresolved Trauma to Take Back Your Life, with Janine Wirth. Welcome to the Grass Gets Greener podcast, the show for survivors by survivors. I'm your host, Melissa Wilson, a bullying survivor and anti-bullying advocate. And each week you'll hear from a survivor who has overcome a traumatic experience to go on to not only survive, but thrive, so that you can too, starting now. Hey there, welcome, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I'm so grateful to have you here. And first off, I just want to acknowledge that I did not get an episode out 2 weeks ago. I know one was supposed to go live, and unfortunately, things just didn't work out for me to be able to get one out that day. But I'm excited to bring you this episode today. We're going to be joined by Janine Wirth of JanineWirth.com. Before we get into it, I do just want to mention that this episode is sponsored by Navni. Navni is the top-ranked anonymous writing website in the world. Navni provides free wellness resources and low-cost online therapy services to help people cope with various levels of emotional distress. Write anonymously, feel better, at novni.com. So Janine is a certified rapid transformational therapist and hypnotherapist. She's helping women heal from their traumatic childhoods and reclaim their self-worth. And she's going to share what has led her to do the work that she does today, including her own experience of having a traumatic childhood with an unstable and abusive home life, and how she felt different for most of her life, and how the environment that she grew up in made her become a perfectionist and want to have control. And she's going to share a story with us of a traumatic experience she had when she was 18 years old, and how her traumatic childhood ended up saving her life. And she's going to talk about a particular type of hypnotherapy that has helped her to heal. And we're going to talk about how hypnosis works as well, and address some misconceptions about it. And really just lots of good stuff in this episode. And I think you'll find it really helpful and informative. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it. And I'm going to go bring Janine on. Janine, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me here today to share your story with us.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well. So you had reached out to me, and we had a call prior to recording this just to connect and get to know each other a little bit. And I definitely wanted to have you on the show to have you share your story with us. You experienced a traumatic childhood, and then later you had a very scary thing happen to you, and you talk about how your traumatic childhood ended up saving your life at that point. And I know you're doing well today, and you're helping others heal from trauma and PTSD as a specialist trained in those areas. And we'll talk about a particular type of hypnotherapy that has been crucial for your healing and how it can help others as well. So what I like to do, Janine, is have you start out by sharing a summary with us of what you experienced growing up, so that we have that context, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound okay to you?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, just, kind of share with us what you'd like us to know about what you experienced and how old you were when it happened.
Okay. Well, when I think of my childhood, the phrase that comes to mind is train wreck. I'm a mother of 3 children, and it's not something that I would want for them. So my mother and father had a very violent, some people might call it passionate, but in essence, it's violent relationship. So I often saw domestic violence. And then at the age of 6, my father passed away in a car accident. And my mother decided to move away. So I was basically estranged from my father's family for 32 years.
Wow.
With zero contact. I actually found them this year on Easter Sunday on Facebook.
Wow. Oh, not too long ago.
Yes, I'll actually be having a reunion with them in July. But that's just the one part of it. After that, she got remarried. But my childhood wasn't very stable because we moved around a lot. So in my 12 years of school, I actually attended 7 different schools.
Wow. That
Yes,
makes it difficult to get settled in, doesn't it?
exactly. After the age of 12, I actually stopped believing in this concept of a best friend because I thought to myself, it's not even worth it because you invest all this time and then at the drop of a hat, you just have to leave, you know? So,
Were they
but
like in different towns and you kept moving to different locations?
yes, in different states even.
Hmm.
So, that
So,
was really
so the kids that you were in school with, you weren't able to stay in touch with them because of distance.
exactly. And I mean, this was in the 80s and 90s. So Facebook and WhatsApp and all these
Right.
wonderful things didn't exist. So
Yeah, I didn't have that to use.
as a kid during that time, it was very difficult, you know. Um, but the parts that really affected me were that my own mother had experienced trauma and hadn't received help. So that obviously affected the way she parented. So you never really knew what you were going to get. One day it would be completely normal, and the next day it wouldn't be. So, in these violent temper, um, not tantrums, but outbursts, she would then also physically abuse me, you know, as a form to sort of get that rage out, I suppose.
Hmm.
And later on, I actually was, I didn't even know what word you could use, stalked in my own home by my stepfather. So the one night when I was about 12 or 13, he came into my bedroom completely naked. And I was awake, but pretending to be sleeping. And then he left again. And from that night, I started locking my bedroom door every day, just in absolute fear, you know. And
Hmm.
while other girls were wondering, you know, the normal teenage angst and drama of does this boy like them or, you know, are they popular? My sort of reality was remembering to put the lights off when I got dressed or remembering to lock my bedroom door at night, you know.
Hmm.
So even though he never physically touched me, that constant fear is very difficult to deal with on a daily basis, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
So then my mother also had these phases where now being a trained psychotherapist, I recognize as depression, where she would just stay in bed for like weeks on end. So that made it quite difficult for me as well, because from the age of about 13, I would get home after sports and whatever between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then would still have to cook for the family, then have my homework. You know, it was sort of that I was taking on that role of the caretaker, which for a 13-year-old is quite a lot of pressure, you
Hmm.
know.
Do you have any siblings or were you alone?
I do have a sister who's 4 years younger. So that was sort of another role added to me as well because I was signing her homework and her tests and things like that. What a mother would usually do. So my whole experience was completely different. And I actually felt different my entire life because when I looked at my peers, you know, their moms were coming to parents' evenings at school and supporting their sport days and, you know, would be waiting for them at home on a rainy day with a, you know, a nice drink and some cookies. And that has
Mhm.
obviously not
Yeah,
been my
you didn't have
experience.
that. Hmm.
No. So my whole concept of what a mother is and does was completely different to that of the people around me. And I
Hmm.
was acutely aware of that because whenever I went to go visit friends or that, it was like walking into a different world. I was
Hmm.
like, wow, this is amazing. But it, of course, made me acutely aware of what I was missing.
Right. Right, which is difficult. And were your friends aware of the environment that you were growing up in?
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
At school, I was a very hard worker because that was sort of the one thing that I could control. So I always got very good grades and was a bit of a control freak or a perfectionist because I felt that that was the only thing that was completely mine and that I could influence,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have problems at school or anything like that. But I didn't have friends that would come and visit me. I didn't have birthday parties except for my first, my 18th, and my 21st. So because I wasn't allowed to have friends come over to visit, they never really got to see that environment or would know my truth because it just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then as a teenager, part of that control or having just wanting to have that feeling of having some sort of power, I then also started, I didn't have full-blown anorexia, but I was definitely flirting with anorexia at one stage because it just felt so good to be in control of something, when everything else was so unstable.
Right. Right. And that's why people tend to turn to self-harm, right? Because it's something they can control.
Exactly. It's some way that you can sort of just have something that is completely yours, and that regardless of what else is going on in your life, you always have that constant. It's like the one constant thing in your life.
Mm-hmm. And when we're in these environments where things are happening that are out of our control, we're looking for things that we can do to take some of that control back, even if it's, things that are harmful to us.
Exactly. So,
This was when you were
luckily,
a teenager, you said?
yes, in my teen years. And then when I was 18 years old, it was actually the very day that I had gotten my driver's license. I had gone out with a friend and wanted to celebrate that. And on that night, I was then hijacked, kidnapped, and almost raped at gunpoint.
Yeah, I know you sent me like a video where you were talking about that, and it just sounds like it was such a scary and just terrible experience that you went through.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's the last thing that you expect, and because there were two armed men involved, they didn't even give us the opportunity to get out the car. We thought that if we give them all our belongings, they would just take the car and leave us behind. But that wasn't the case. We basically had to climb over the seat into the back. So we had no chance to even open the door, and they just decided that they're taking us with them.
Mm. And I know you talk about how your traumatic childhood ended up saving your life on this day. Tell us, about that and like what happened there.
Well, because of all the things that had happened to me in my childhood and sort of knowing or having this feeling that I can only rely on myself, it made me, first of all, quite stubborn, but it also really helped me to build up this resilience. And on that evening, when one of the hijackers grabbed me by the arm, they took us to a very bushy, beachy area, very dense foliage and that. And there was a sand dune, basically with an incline. And he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me up there, obviously with still having a gun. And when we got to the top, he said to me, "Take off your clothes." So I was standing at the top with him pointing the gun, maybe 2 inches from my chest. And I was looking down, and all of a sudden this thought came into my head. And I was like, I'm probably going to die here, so I might as well fight back. And I just turned around, I looked him straight in the face, and I said, you will have to shoot me first. And of course, he wasn't expecting this because that's not how people usually react. And you know as well, I mean, we study this. In that situation, you have the fight or flight or freeze reaction. And for me, quite unexpectedly, the fight reaction came up, you know? And I could see the shock in his face. He didn't know what to do because here he is pointing a gun at me and I'm telling him he should shoot me.
Yeah, it's a scary thing to do, right?
But
just say, yes, go ahead and shoot me.
Yes, because in that moment, I thought to myself, okay, so I've had this train wreck of a childhood. I've just today gotten my first piece of proper independence and a taste of adulthood. And then something like this happens. And I really thought that they were going to kill us anyway. So I thought to myself, well, I might as well stand up for myself. And that is all from having this traumatic childhood. It's like something in me snapped and just said, right, enough is enough. I'm not just going to stand there and take it without even trying to defend myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had just had enough. You weren't going to let another person do something like that to you.
Yes, because basically my whole life I had this feeling that I wasn't in control. All these things were happening to me and I was defenseless. And at that point, I just thought, well, I'm probably going to die anyway, but I might as well stand up for myself.
Mm-hmm. And then what did he do?
Well, I could see his whole face was just like so perplexed. He had no idea what to do. And this what happened in South Africa. In South Africa, we have 11 official languages. So he was speaking to his friend in their own cultural language. So I couldn't understand that part. But they were sort of busy speaking to each other. And then I looked down and started speaking to his accomplice, who could speak a little bit of English. And he wasn't as violent and aggressive as the guy that had pulled me up there. And I said to him, you know, we've given you literally everything. You can take my car, but leave us alone now. This is just getting way out of hand. And he was then speaking to his accomplice in their language. And the guy then looked back at me and he said to me, you're a crazy bee.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he sort of went down met with his accomplice, and then they took my car and drove off.
Oh.
So afterwards, I, of course, had PTSD.
Mm.
And I actually went to go, well, what made me go and seek help and see a psychologist is shortly after that, I think it was about a week and a half, I was sitting in my car. The police had a big shootout with these people and managed to get my car back. So even though it was a bit damaged, it was still usable. And a week and a half later, I was sitting in my car in a parking bay, and one of my friends came up from the side and smacked against the window with his hand, and I almost jumped out of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
I just that fear and panic, and it's as if all these like flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought to myself, okay, I cannot live like this. And I'm not going to be somebody that's now just going to give up and say, okay, I'm not going to drive anymore or anything like that. So I actually then went to go see a psychologist. And
now, were you still living at home at this time?
Yes, I was. I was working, but still living at home.
Mm-hmm. And were things still like not good there?
Well, this event certainly changed things a bit, because it was actually because of that event that my own mother told me her story. And that hijacking looked like a day in the park compared to what she experienced. And then all of a sudden, so many things started making sense to me. And I couldn't help but have this thought, if she had gotten help back then, how different would my life and her life have been?
Mm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I have decided to work with women, because I've seen firsthand the effects and how it basically shows up everywhere. The way that you parent, your relationships. And I mean, a lot of the issues that I experienced with my own mother, I believe, could have been treated if she had gotten help back then when she was a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it'll just continue until that cycle is broken, right?
Exactly. And it's because I didn't want to repeat that cycle. And I wanted to have a completely different experience in mothering my own children, that it sort of got me interested, because I've been studying PTSD and trauma for many years as a hobby, trying to learn as much as possible. And then I decided, well, why not just actually make it my profession? And then went and got my psychotherapy license, went to London and got this accreditation as a rapid transformational therapist and hypnotherapist, because when I went and did the actual course in London and had treatment there, a lot of my stuff that I thought I had dealt with actually came up. And it's only once I dealt with that using this method did I realize, it's like, if you've been carrying this heavy weight on your shoulders your whole life, you don't even notice it after a while because you're so used to it. That is your normal.
Mm-hmm.
And only once that was dealt with and I didn't have it anymore did I realize, wow, okay, I was carrying that around for decades.
What were some of the things that were coming up for you that you realized you still had to work on?
Well, especially anger. I had a lot of anger, issues of basically just feeling different my entire life. And one of the things that we deal with in this method is a chance for you to get rid of that anger and that feeling of being different, because all of us want to belong. It's one of our basic human needs. So if you spend your entire life being hyper vigilant and having this feeling that you can't trust anyone but yourself, all of this anger and then feeling different, it definitely affects you emotionally, because I noticed that I had quite a bad temper. It was like a thing. All the women in our family had a bad temper. No, it's unresolved trauma and anger that makes you snap at petty little things. As soon as I had that, I didn't have these dramatic temper outbursts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that made such a difference to me, because I thought that's part of my identity or my personality, but no, it's not. And
yeah, I mean, you have the power to change that. You don't have to accept that you're going to be someone who's going to be angry or is always hypervigilant,
Exactly. And that's also childhood conditioning, because if that is how you see people deal with their own emotions, you think that that is normal. You see it every day, all the time. And you think, well, okay, that's how we deal with emotions here.
Yeah.
And
the great thing is we get to choose how we want to show up, how we want to be, the energy that we want to put out there into the world.
Exactly. And for me, that's made such a difference, because now I have this feeling that I can actually control my emotions, where before I didn't have that feeling.
They controlled you, right?
Exactly. I would just react. And now I'm like, okay, I don't have this split or this trigger happy temper, and that's made a real difference to me. I mean, obviously that changes how I show up every day, changes how I parent. I feel it's like I'm actually a patient person, but didn't know it. So I could definitely feel a difference within me after I'd had this therapy, because those feelings had been dormant but present for so long that I didn't even recognize them anymore. I just thought that's how life is, or that's a part of me, that's how everyone feels,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
So,
not.
yeah. So tell us more about this type of therapy and how it works.
Well, it's called rapid transformational therapy, and it was developed by Marissa Peer, who has been using and developing this method for over 30 years. So basically, it combines hypnosis with cognitive behavioral therapy, NLP, neurolingual programming, and also Gestalt therapy. So with normal talk therapy, it's normal that the client would come every week or every 2 weeks, and this would go on for quite a long time, sometimes even 5 years, depending what issues they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But with this method, we're using hypnosis to directly dialogue with the subconscious mind. And we get to the root of the problem, usually within 1 to 3 sessions. So instead of speaking about it and the logical mind trying to find a solution, because most of the time what the logical mind thinks is not what the subconscious mind comes up with when we do this process in hypnosis. And that way we can actually deal with whatever event, in this case trauma, we can deal with the emotions that are linked to the event, because it's not the event. Everybody survived the event, but it's the emotions that we've linked to that event that is causing the problems, the PTSD and the flashbacks and these feelings that people have.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through this whole process. It takes about 1.5 to 2 hours. And at the end of that, you immediately feel better. And you can use it for almost anything. I mean, I used it for something completely different just to test it, because I'm a skeptical person and I want
No,
to know
that's good, to make
before.
sure it works.
Exactly. And before I started using it specifically for trauma and PTSD, I wanted to make sure that this method works for really almost anything. So I had misophonia, which is the hatred of sound. And I had that my entire life.
Of
So
sound, you said?
of sound, correct.
Hmm.
So noises of like cutlery, crockery, people eating, if a restaurant's too full or too loud, huge crowds of people. All of this used to really annoy me, like irritate me to the point where I want to leave. So you can imagine when your husband wants to take you on a romantic date to a restaurant, that things can be quite tense if you just want to leave.
Yeah, not enjoyable if it's
like
noisy.
speed eating.
Or yeah.
So to test this method, I said that I want to know why I've had that my entire life, because that's nothing my logical brain didn't have an answer. So in hypnosis, 4 scenes came up. In the first scene, I was 2 years old and my parents were having a domestic fight, domestic violence. And my father picked up a glass and threw it against the wall. Now, obviously, as a 2-year-old, this was really scary to me because, first of all, the noise, the screaming, the shouting, the violence, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
In the second scene, I was 6 years old. And there I was at home with my mother and my sister, and there was this really loud, insistent knocking. And that was actually when they came to tell us that my father had passed away in a car accident. In the third scene, it was at my father's funeral. So again, I was 6 years old, and actually they had prepared me very well that the casket would go into the ground, and I was fine with that part. But what they didn't prepare me for was the reception afterwards, where they have cake and tea for the people that have traveled. And in this scene, I was standing there watching it, and I thought to myself, I was so mad because I thought, this is the worst day of my life. And here, these people, you would swear that they were at a birthday party or something. That was my 6-year-old interpretation of that, you know. And it's like in the movies when there's a big explosion or some huge sound wave. In hypnosis, in that scene, as I was standing watching these people, that sound wave, I could see it just hitting me. And then in the fourth scene, I myself, at the age of 8, was involved in a car accident. So if not even 2 years earlier, your own father passes away in a car accident, what do you as an 8-year-old think? Obviously that you're also going to die.
Right.
So with that crash and the sound of the metal and the car spinning out of control, now what we do is we see the pattern that our subconscious mind has developed. So my subconscious mind was sending me signals and associating all these loud noises, big crowds of people with violence, shock, fear, sadness, bad news, and death.
Yeah. Things that are going to trigger these emotions in you.
Exactly. So it's quite logical that I, as soon as these sounds start triggering me in my environment, would have this feeling that I need to leave. And it was amazing to me because once I had the scenes, because your subconscious mind is like a huge safe. It has every record, every event, everything that's ever happened to you. And once you can access those memories and you can see this pattern, it all clicks, like a giant jigsaw puzzle. And you're like, oh, okay. Then we do a certain process where we deal with that. And then you get a recording that you listen to for 21 days. And this is basically to build these new neural pathways, because you can think of it, it's like downloading the old software and now you have to replace it with something. And this is where the recording comes in. So this session is almost like the diagnosis and the recording is the cure. And that very evening, while I had a whole group of people doing this course with me, that night we decided to go out for dinner together. And we went to this really rustic Spanish place. It was tiny, one room. There were 11 of us there. They didn't have background music, these old rustic wooden tables, no tablecloths. And for the first time ever, I was not irritated by cutlery sounds or people scraping their plates or glasses. I could just relax and actually concentrate on the people and the conversations. And when I went home that night, I phoned my husband because I was in London, he was in Germany, and I said to him, this technique is going to change lives. And I told him about my experience because even at home, I would always play background music while we have dinner. And everyone think, oh, that's so nice and this wonderful atmosphere. Yes, it is. But the real reason was to drown out the noises at the table, so I could at least have dinner with my family without freaking out. So once I had this experience, I was absolutely convinced because it just made so much sense. And the fact that I could have a solution in that one session, and it's something that's completely changed my life. I just knew that if I can use this for trauma and PTSD, women are going to have relief immediately. And who doesn't want that?
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and these scenes that were coming up for you during the hypnosis, were these memories that you were aware of before then?
The scene from where I was 2 years old, I didn't consciously remember. Obviously, I could remember a bit of my father's funeral. And I knew that I had been in a car accident because at the age of 8, I could remember that.
But
But
you weren't like connecting the dots between those experiences and the
no,
triggers that you were having.
absolutely not, because my logical mind just couldn't make sense of the information and to actually put it together. That's why it's so wonderful to be able to dialogue directly with the subconscious, because the subconscious doesn't care about logic. It knows what it knows and it thinks what it thinks, and it doesn't care about your logic, and that's why when people try to solve or look for solutions with their logic mind, most of the time it's wrong. And I see that with my own clients. I had a woman come to me with binge eating. She said to me, listen, you've got to help me. My binge eating is just getting completely out of control. So she presented with binge eating. And as soon as we actually started going into hypnosis and looking at her scenes, it had nothing to do with food. It all had to do with unresolved trauma. The symptom was just binge eating. That's how it was presenting. So her logical mind could never make the connection. My binge eating is to do with this childhood trauma. Only after the session it's like the lights go on and you're like, oh my goodness, why did I not see that? But you can't, because your logical mind just can't make those connections.
Yeah. It's really interesting how the mind works.
It's amazing how the mind works and how it holds on to things that you think are completely irrelevant, and then it comes up in hypnosis and you're like, wow, that really affected me so much.
Now, I mean, is hypnosis something that, is for everyone? Does it, like, I know, like, I mean, I personally, I've tried it a little bit myself, and I don't feel like I don't know, I guess I don't feel like I was really going into a hypnotic state. And I don't know if it's just, how it's being done, or if it's just me, So, I mean, what's kind of your take on that?
Well, we say that we can use it for anybody. The only time that we have to be careful is if the person suffers from epilepsy, because obviously you don't want them to get triggered and have a fit while in hypnosis. So you would want to consult their physician before that. But it can be used by absolutely everyone. And everyone thinks that, oh, hypnosis is so difficult, or people can control your mind. But that's absolutely not true, because what people see, in Las Vegas, or the stage hypnosis where everyone's clucking like chickens or doing something ridiculous, that is not the hypnosis that we do. That is actually called mesmerizing, and I hate it. Because then it's such a false perception for
it gives
people.
hypnosis a bad name.
Exactly. And hypnosis is actually a really scientific process. It all has to do with neuroplasticity, So what happens is you're basically putting your logical mind to sleep, and I cannot control you. Any hypnosis that you do, you are in control of it. So an example from everyday life is if you get in your car and you want to drive to a place that you drive to often, so you know the route, and you get there and you think to yourself, I don't remember the drive here. I mean, I'm sure that you've probably had that yourself as well. And that's basically the very first level of light self-hypnosis. So hypnosis is almost like a deep meditation. It's very relaxing, because the logical mind, the one that chatters the whole day, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. And did you see the way she looked at you? And, that chatter gets put basically on pause, and we deal with the subconscious mind. So it's very, very relaxing. It's very safe. I've had clients before. Example, I had a woman that was raped when she was 12 by an adult man. And during the scene, she said to me, well, I'm 12 years old and this man is raping me. And I said to her, who is it? And she said to me, I don't want to say his name. Now, if I had control of her mind, she wouldn't be able to say, I don't want to say his name, Or if I had control of people's mind. I could say, okay, Melissa, buy me a Ferrari, please. It just doesn't work like that. So
Right.
you do have control of that. And another misconception is that people think, especially when it's traumatic experiences, that they're going to relive it or be re-traumatized. But that's just not true, because if I have a client that gets attacked by a dog and we talk about it in hypnosis, it's not as if the person feels that pain all over again. It's just to get the information for the person to say, a dog attacked me and I felt scared. Because we're after the emotion, not the actual physical event. And when we deal with trauma, specifically sexual abuse, that sort of trauma, we have a special process where we take the person out of the scene, where they basically watch it as if they're watching a film, and they just give the information. We don't want the nitty-gritty details. We just want to say, oh, yes, this happened. It's like to confirm that the person was abused, and then we deal with the emotions. We don't ask, it would be really unethical to try and make the person relive that. That is not what we do at all.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, and it's certainly another tool that people have available to them that they can try if it's something that resonates with them, and it might be able to definitely help in the way that it's helped you. And
Exactly.
And the type of hypnosis that we've been talking about in particular is the rapid transformational therapy, right? That was originated by Marissa Peer. Yeah. So
yes. So it's not normal hypnosis where they just try and give you suggestions, like if you want to stop smoking or that, and try and give you positive suggestions. This method is meant to deal with the emotions. So we're combining NLP and CBT, but just getting the results so much faster, because that's what we want for our clients. When they come in and they are having flashbacks every day, they're getting to the point where they don't even want to get out of bed in the morning, or they're self-harming, we want to provide them with relief as fast as possible in the safest possible way. And for me, I personally have not seen a technique that can do it as quickly and safely in that amount of time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that information with us, Janine.
You're very welcome.
So, yeah. So, tell us, how are you doing today? And are there things that you still struggle with?
I'm actually doing really well. And since I dealt with the things that came up for me in London that I wasn't even aware I was holding on to, it's just really made me aware of how women don't even know that they are living in that state. So for me now, I don't have a bad day. And people think, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. But it's true, because I know exactly that if anything ever had to come up for me, I now have a technique that will deal with it immediately. And for me, it's such a joy and a privilege to get up every day knowing that I'm going to change people's lives. They're going to come to me and I'm going to take the worst experience they've ever had and completely neutralize it so that it's like grass is green and sky is blue. It doesn't really affect them anymore. So that they can be the people that they were meant to be before all this stuff happened to them. So for me to know that I get to do that for a living, it's just fantastic. I have never felt more calm or relaxed or in control of my emotions and my actions than I do, that I have since the last 18 months.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us about what else you do, what else you have going on.
Well, I have a private Facebook group called Freedom from Your Traumatic Childhood. And it's a group for women where I basically wanted to create a safe space for women of similar backgrounds where they could just discuss and we could educate each other and share. So I regularly have information in there, and it's like a big campfire. It's a space where these women can just come and share their experiences in a non-judgmental space, because everybody's been through something similar. And I'm actually going to be hosting a webinar it will be in the beginning of August. It will be available on my Facebook page, where I'm going to give people the opportunity to heal their inner child. So basically, I will put them in hypnosis, and they will have a chance to dialogue with their inner child, find out what is upsetting them at this point, or what they haven't dealt with, the unresolved trauma, and to basically take them through the process, which is a critical part in our therapy session. But I'll just do that part because obviously a normal therapy session would take 2 hours. This part will take about half an hour. Take them through that process so they can have some immediate relief, and also see how safe and effective hypnosis really is.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, I will have your Facebook page linked up so people can follow along on there if they're interested.
Thank you. And of course, I have a normal website, which is just www.janinewirth.com.
Sounds good. I'll have that on there as well. So, Janine, I want to ask you the final question that I have for you today. And that is, given what you know now, if you could go back to when you were going through your tough times and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
That I'm not alone. And that's something that I realize now doing this work. There are so many people that have been affected by some form of abuse. And it's not true that I can't trust anybody and that I can only rely on myself. That is this concept that I had for so long. And I realize now that that is not true at all. And that you can be normal. I thought to myself that I would never feel normal. And it's simply not true. I feel absolutely normal now.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing so well and helping others now as well. And yeah, it's crazy how, when you start like doing this work and getting involved in this area, like you find so many other people who've been through all these things as well. It's just,
exactly.
It's crazy to think how we've all been affected by something or another.
Yes. And the time is definitely changing now. You have things like the Me Too movement, and I love it because we as a society are removing the stigma, that we can't speak about it, because secrets shackle us with shame and guilt. And as soon as we actually start identifying this, acknowledging it, that's when the healing can start.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's definitely still some stigma out there around this stuff, but we're definitely making a lot of improvements. So the more we keep talking about it, the better it's going to be.
Exactly.
So usually I wrap up with how people can connect with you or find out more about what you have going on. So I know you've mentioned the website, the Facebook page and group, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm on Facebook. I have a business page, and people are welcome to just contact me either through my website or my Facebook page or Facebook Messenger. That's where I'm sort of active the most, or that's the best way to contact me.
All right, sounds good. So, Janine, I just want to thank you for coming on here today, sharing your story with us, and talking about this type of hypnotherapy that's been so helpful for you, and hopefully it's been interesting for the listeners and something that they can take something away from. So just thank you for coming on and sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great to have this talk and to let people know that they're not alone and there is a solution for them.
All right. Well, I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to the show today. This has been the Grass Gets Greener podcast, episode 132. Go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/Janine Wirth, and Wirth is spelled Wirth. to find the links mentioned during this episode or to leave a comment. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. I love talking about different tools and strategies that are available to help you in your healing journey because there are so many options and there's no need for us to not get the help we deserve. If you're interested in hearing more about what we were talking about here today, then I invite you to check out Janine's website or her Facebook page. And I would love to hear from you if you've tried any type of hypnotherapy yourself and what your experience was with it. So feel free to reach out if you'd like and let me know about that. And speaking of strategies that can help you in your healing journey, if you're looking for some additional ones, then don't forget to head over to the website to grab your free copy of the Top 10 Strategies Guide for Survivors. In it, you'll find the top 10 most common strategies my podcast guests have used for overcoming the effects of past trauma. So it's a great place to get started if you're looking for some strategies that can help you in your healing, as they have helped my guests. And you can find that at thegrassgetsgreener.com/guide or also on the show notes page. So be sure to grab that if you haven't yet. And lastly, don't forget to head over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave the show a rating and review so that we can reach as many survivors as possible. And, as always, have hope.